Bum 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 bum.
Tomatoes?
Hello, and welcome to the video for How Do I Use Datasmith Dataprep. If you're using Datasmith, traditionally you have the ability to click on Datasmith, find your file, you can choose where it's going to go to, you can choose some options, and it imports the Datasmith file. If you want to massage this, maybe change some things during the import process, prior to Unreal Engine 4.24, you would have to use either Python or Blueprint nodes to massage the import process. Unreal Engine 4.24 introduces the Dataprep system. It allows us to visually adjust that import process. Let's take a look at it. If we go up to Edit, Plugins, first of all, if you're using Datasmith, you obviously want to make sure you have the Datasmith importer enabled. But for Dataprep, we want to make sure we have the Dataprep editor imported. Once these are enabled and you've restarted, we're now going to create a Dataprep object. So anywhere in your scene, create a Dataprep object. Now the important part here is it's going to create the scene file for Datasmith wherever the Dataprep file is. So let's make a new folder and we'll call this house. And we're going to create our Dataprep file in here. We can right click, Dataprep, Dataprep asset. I'm going to name this Dataprep house, and my scene is going to be named this as well when we bring it in. When we open it up, we're going to get access to a new editor. And it has all the same basic familiar things that you might be used to. Some blueprint stuff down here, some information on the right, information on the left and right, which will populate shortly, and then a viewport. And this is going to allow us to visually edit the import process. So on the top right, we have our imports. We'll click on that. We want a file to import. I'm going to point to a Datasmith file like I normally would with the importer. And then we're going to choose where it's going to go, in this case, content house, as well as an additional sublevel if I want to create a sublevel in the current open level. Just like normal importing with Datasmith, it's going to import the scene into my current level. So let me get rid of the ground, which I don't need, my player start, and my reflection. I'm going to turn my light to movable just to make it easier. Now I have a scene ready for my import. We go back into here. I'm not going to use a sublevel. We need to start the import process. Top left, we have import. What this is going to do is going to import our Datasmith file like we might normally be used to, but it's not going to put it onto our disk. It's not going to put it into our content folder yet. It's going to load it up temporarily into the Dataprep editor, which we can see here, for us to modify and massage the process of importing. Now that it's done importing, we can take a look at the layout. On the left, we have the original source information. All of this came from the original file. We can see we have our meshes themselves and their details over here. Underneath that, we can see a separate section for our materials that were imported. And then we can see some textures that were imported. On the right, we have basically the layout of what it's going to look like when it creates the scene and brings it into Unreal Engine. So you can see a basic one-to-one mapping. We may have an item called, well, here's an easy way to do it. Let's go to table. We have 4 tables: coffee table, dining table, folding, and side. And if we go over here and type table, you can see we have our 4 tables. They are meshes inside of our editor, which means they're going to end up being meshes inside of here. You can see our little coffee table right here. Okay, this is all good. This is how the normal system works, but how can we modify it? Well, we're going to do a few things. 1, I'm going to get rid of all the lights on the import process. And 2, I'm going to change some of the materials during the import process. I'm going to change this generic grass and ground and landscape into something a little better, using existing materials already inside the engine. First thing, here is our graph, and our graph determines from left to right what happens. If we right click, we have 2 basic things. Select by allows us to find things to work on, and operations, things we're going to do with the items we found. Now you don't have to use both. For example, I can go operations, substitute material, and this is going to work on anything it finds inside the world, not just if I used a select by. So this is a good one to start with, substitute material. So let's go ahead and clear out our filters, and let's look at something to substitute. I have this ground right here. Well, if we look on the right, you can see it's using the material called earth. If we scroll down here to our material list, you'll find we have one called earth. Okay, So we want to replace the earth material search right here. Anything that matches it, we're going to replace with a different one. In this case, I have a gravel asset I want to replace it with. And at this point, nothing's going to happen until we use the execute. So to walk over the workflow, we have import, brings the original assets, the Datasmith, into our system to work on. Execute, executes our code to this existing Datasmith imported file. And commit takes the executed changes and commits them into our project. So if we execute right now, you'll notice our material changed. It went ahead and looked for earth and replaced that material with our gravel. And now you can see we have our nice little gravel along the outside. Okay, well, let's also change a few more things. This outside one, we can see it's called grass. Well, this is pretty simple. In our list over here, we'll drag and we'll drop, and we can substitute material. Or we can drag and drop underneath here and make it run both of these actions at the same time. Maybe we want this one action to substitute multiple materials. Or you can right-click anywhere in this background and choose an operation or select. For example, set material, and you can change multiple things at once. You can also right-click to delete if you choose the name. So in this case, we have grass. If I click on our object, which we go right here, you can see it's called grass for the element, and we're going to want the grass material. I'm going to hit execute, and something different is going to happen this time. Because we've already changed our original asset, we've gone ahead and we substituted the material. It now needs to restore everything back to the original imported version and then run our actions. So the second and every successive time after you run execute, it's going to take a little bit longer while it re-imports everything and then re-executes. But in this case, you can see we've substituted those two materials. We now have our grass and we have our gravel. The next thing is getting rid of items. This one's pretty simple. In my world, I have some lights. If I search for light, we can see we have a few things in here, and we have some spotlights. We have some point lights. We also have a special light in here we're going to talk about later, which is this Datasmith area light. I don't want these lights in the scene. I want them removed. Now I can manually use an editor utility widget, which is the normal way, or I could go in and search for all the lights, remove them, but we're going to do everything on the import. So let's find our lights and remove them. So we have select by is class of. We can drop this in here, connect it up, just like blueprints. It executes left to right. Find things we want to do something with. In this case, I'm going to do point light. So we'll find the point light. And then what do we want to do? Well, now we need it to do something. So if we right-click below here, first we selected our point lights, so now we need to operate on them. And we're just simply going to delete anything it selected. So it's going to find all the lights and delete them. Okay, easy enough. We hit execute again. We end up waiting while it restores and it goes through. Once this is done, it should process left to right. It's going to find our earth materials and replace them, our grass materials and replace them, filter out all of our items by class, our point lights, and delete them. And if we look through here and we type in point, we now no longer have any point lights in our scene. Okay. Well, we have a few spotlights, which I want to get rid of, and then we have this really weird light. Should be pretty simple, right? We can add a new one to do for delete. So up here, we can do select by, condition is class of. Then we'll go ahead and change that over to our other light type. So for example, we want this to be spot. So we'll go to spotlight. Now that we have our spotlight selected, we can go ahead and it's going to find our spotlights and our point lights and delete them. Okay, easy enough. Execute again. We wait for the import. Once the import's done, it's going to go ahead and reprocess. Again, substituting our materials and then filtering out our spotlights and our point lights and deleting them. However, it's not actually going to work. You notice I have my point lights now. I have my point lights over here, and if I was to look for spot, I have my spotlights. First thing to note for these filters, they are ands. So I'm looking for a spotlight and a point light. And since that's not the case, I don't have one actor that is a spotlight and a point light, it returns nothing and it won't delete it. So let's delete this top filter by class, and we'll just basically select this one. We'll copy it. We can copy or Control C, Control V to paste. We just make a new one, and replace this with spot. And replace the spotlight, and we do the same with the last one. One of the special lights that it creates is this one right here, which is this really bright, funny looking one, which is this Datasmith area light. So let's go ahead and get rid of that one because I don't want that. So Datasmith area light. And now it's going to go through and it's going to do our materials. We're not filtering out. So all of these actions run on everything inside this event. This one filters the point lights, deletes, spotlight, delete, area light, deletes. And when we execute, we should get the desired result. Now something to note, this is in experimental or beta as of Unreal Engine 4.24. So we don't have parity with the Blueprint or Python nodes yet. But as time goes on, it's going to expand upon it and it's going to become more robust. You notice if I type in light now, all I have left are my actors with the name of light. I no longer have any physical lights in my scene. And I can go ahead and adjust this as I want. Let's say I'm done. I'm happy. I can save this Dataprep asset and choose commit. It's going to go ahead and then basically finish everything we've done. We've already imported. We've already executed. So we've done all of our code here. We now have this temporary asset. We now want to commit to disk using the commit option. Once this is done, it's going to import it into our scene, just like we would a normal Datasmith import. And it's going to put these files in a Datasmith scene and all the actors and all the meshes and everything into our project like we'd expect. So here we have house. Here's our Dataprep asset with the scene next to it. And then here's all of our geometry, materials, and everything. And if we go into here, you can see we have it imported. We have our materials changed out. We have no lights in our world. We're ready to work on our Datasmith scene right now. And if you want, you can always go ahead and load this back up, make some adjustments, go ahead and re-import, execute, and commit. You notice there's quite a few options here. Again, to summarize, we can select. Once we've got something selected, we have operations to do on that selection. If we want an operation can be run on anything, it doesn't have to be selected. It'll run on the entire scene. You do have a few special things inside of here, which are kind of hidden. So if you want to add something in the bottom, right click on this bottom part underneath your existing node, so it'll add it below it. If you want to add it above it, you can add above. We have the ability to have parameters. So we have options that can be changed in one spot. Let's say, for example, you wanted to take this material and you want it to be easily editable instead of inside of this graph. Well, we can right click on that, link to parameter, and name it. So we're going to call this the grass substitute. And enter. Now we have this parameter linked over here under parameterization. So if we wanted to have this in more than one spot, or we wanted to make it just so your editors or designers can adjust the items in one spot, they're all right here. Let's say we wanted to be moss instead. You'll notice it changes. And almost every single one of these items can be parameterized. So we could, for example, have a moss and the material we search for all in one section, and they can easily adjust them. And it doesn't have to be unique to that individual model you import. This could be just a generic data prep that they could easily adjust by changing here.